Y ahora seguimos hacia adelante, pero ya miramos hacia Europa. Vamos a intentar saber la visión de algunas de las asociaciones nacionales más importantes junto con Atuc. Para ello, quiero dar la palabra a Ilia Boris Iglesias, responsable del Comité de Economía del Transporte de la UITP, que nos aportará esta visión europea. Ella va a coger el control, va a moderar el próximo panel. Ilia, cuando quieras.
Muchas gracias por invitarme a moderar esta sesión sobre las experiencias internacionales, bueno, más bien europeas, en la que mostraremos varias experiencias gracias a la participación de 3 miembros activos del Comité de Economía y Transporte de TEC. Antes de nada, me gustaría un poco introducir el trabajo que hacemos dentro del marco de la UITP sobre el tema de financiación y del transporte público. Para empezar, este comité está compuesto por 50 miembros internacionales y liderado por Transport for London, que es la autoridad de transporte en la ciudad de Londres, y Transports Metropolitan de Barcelona en Barcelona. Y tenemos la suerte de poder incluir también con la participación muy activa de Metro Madrid, de la MT en Madrid y de Metro Bilbao. Gracias a eso, este año ha sido un año bastante interesante a pesar del contexto y la coyuntura, en el que no solo hemos podido publicar una posición sobre la gratuidad del transporte público, que ha sido publicada en septiembre y está ahora mismo siendo traducida al español. Esto ha sido un tema, y es un tema muy interesante porque estamos viendo ahora mismo un gran interés para este instrumento para poder incentivar otra vez los pasajeros a entrar dentro de los sistemas y poder volver a utilizar el transporte público. Estamos también publicando, o se publicará a mediados de diciembre, un estudio sobre el impacto económico y financiero del COVID en el sector. Y básicamente esto es lo que ha centrado gran parte de nuestras actividades este año. Y a pesar de todo, las actividades dentro del sector no han cambiado y seguimos trabajando en otros temas, como el de la electrificación del transporte público, en el que vamos a publicar ya a principios del 2021 2 estudios, uno sobre la metodología de evaluación de diferentes métodos para identificar tecnologías y además ver un poco cómo esta agenda para la electrificación impactará el modelo de negocio de los operadores. Con esto ya me gustaría un poco introducir a nuestros ponentes para esta sesión. A lo largo de esta sesión vamos a oír los invitados sobre las asociaciones nacionales de Francia, Alemania y Italia. Les hemos pedido que nos hagan un pequeño resumen de la situación que están viviendo el sector en sus países respectivos. Les hemos pedido que nos hagan un resumen del marco legal y del financiamiento de cada país y así esperamos que pueda ser de interés también para las discusiones que se está viendo en España. También nos detallarán cómo les ha impactado el COVID y qué medidas han sido adoptadas para poder financiar y apoyar el sector tanto a nivel nacional como usando o preparando el proceso para la distribución de los fondos europeos, cosa que se discutió en el panel anterior. Empezaremos con Francia, con la participación de Stéphanie Lopez Azevedo y a partir de aquí voy a seguir la discusión en inglés. So Stéphanie Lopez Azevedo is the Director and of the Technical and Economic Department of the French Public and Rail Transport Organization of the UTP. After a Master of International Economy, she spent 6 years in a research company working on different market studies. She joined UTP in 2013 as an economist. Stéphanie, could you please provide some information on how the French context is happening at the moment with the COVID and more or less an overview of the French framework on the funding and financing of public transport?
Yes, of course, Elia, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I will first make a focus on the French urban public transport. There is 330 urban PT networks in France, including Paris and its suburbs. These networks cover 73% of the French population and represent 25% of the territory of the France. Can you, next please? These excuse me, these 330 networks are financed by 3 different sources, at quite equal parts, fares, public contributions, and versement mobilité. I think I have to explain what is versement mobilité because it's a French specialty. This is a tax paid by public and private firms to finance the mobility. I'll come back later in the details. And we will see how these sources of funding have been affected by the COVID later. Can you please see the next presentation? Okay. First, we'll see how the traffic and production have been involved during the crisis. During the first confinement, or what we call confinement is during spring in France, the traffic was around 5% of the normal in the urban PT and 10% in the railway transport in France. But the French government asked the operators to maintain the high level of offer, especially in Paris and its suburbs, around 60% of the normal level, and it was half out of Paris area, as you see on this slide. Traffic slowly increased after the first confinement to reach 75% at the end of October, around. We are in the second confinement now. I'm at home, and it's now the traffic is around 50% in France average. Can we see another one, the next one? Of course, you can imagine that this traffic have an impact of the decrease of the fare revenues. But there's another huge source of funding which is affected, is the versement mobilité, as I said in the first place. It represents 9 million euros per year for operating and investment in the urban mobility. That means that with the versement mobilité, authorities pay public transport, carpooling, car sharing, cycling, and it's a tax on the whole wage bill of the firms. So during the confinement and the crisis in the largest way, of course, the firm have laid off some employees, definitively or part-time during the crisis. So the wage bill have decreased a lot, and so the versement mobility too. We see next that we can estimate the decrease of the versement mobilité at about 10% during the year 2020. Ilya, please, can we switch? Yes. So you see that the fares revenue decreased at around 50% during well, actually for 2020, so it represents around 2 billion euros, and the versement mobility decreased at about 10%. It's around 1 billion euros. So at the moment, for the urban public transport in France, with the decrease of the revenues is around 3 billion euros for the moment. We are not able at the moment to estimate what will be the losses. It will run much longer than the time of the crisis. So we'll see that later, because we don't know if the firms will definitely lay off the employment, or it's part-time layoff. We are not able to estimate, and we've seen that we have many problems to go back to the normal traffic as you saw in September or October. So to compensate this crisis, Ilya, please, the French government took measures to limit the impact. So first, in the finance laws, as we see, more than 3 billion are planned for the urban public transport, but this amount is not fairly distributed between Paris and the rest of the France. not in the mountain and not in the dispositif to refund for the refundable advances. Paris is the great winner of the support plant at the moment. But it only represents half of the public transport. Well, only, it's already a lot, but at the moment he is the best. Paris is the best winner of the support plant. There is a recovery plan for 100 billion euros between 2020 and 2022. It includes 1 billion and 2 million for the public transport and cycling, in form of the call of project, which should start in the next few weeks. So we are waiting about for this call of project will be announced very shortly. So that's what I can say at the moment for France.
Thank you very much, Stéphanie. This was a very enlightening presentation on how France is going. If you don't mind, I have a question to follow up on your discussion. I am aware that the French fiscal-based versement mobilité was recently changed in 2020 to adapt to the new changes in mobility. Do you think that this crisis can be seen as an opportunity to revise it, or do you think that this tool still is as relevant and applicable to the French system, especially after or in a post-COVID mobility?
Well, as you said, we had a law, a voted law in December 219, which is called Loi d'orientation des mobilités, orientation law for the mobilities, and that makes that versement mobilité can finance now much more than public transport. At the moment, there is two things. Well, there is two trends. First, in the French towns at the moment, cycling ways was very developed, which we were waiting for a long time. We were waiting for that for a long time. So that's a good point. But there is a little problem that now buses ways are not much the priority of the collectivities now, and that's a problem for the speed of our public transport. And well, we have to find a balance between the two, public transport and the other mobility services. And excuse me, what was the last part of the question?
If you think that versement mobilité would be appropriate in a post-COVID mobility?
Well, of course it is, because versement mobilité is not only made for the users of the public transport. Even if there's more people on cycling or more people who are teleworking, versement mobilité is made for everyone to look for the quality of life in the territories, and I think it's in danger, because people say that, well, the teleworking is now great, very developed. So maybe we should review the versement mobility, but I think it's not a good argument. We have a social and environmental crisis in front of us. So the versement mobility we will defend it with strength, because it's very important for the quality of life in our city and for the health of French people.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to change country, and we are going to head to Germany. Here we have Dr. Till Ackermann, who is head of the Department of Economics and Business Development within the VDV, so the Association of German Transport Company. He joined the VDV in 1998 and has had mutual functions, including the funding of the VDV e-ticket service company and the VDV Academy. He has his master's degree from the University of Stuttgart and wrote his doctoral thesis at the Institute Railway on transportation. He's also the author of a book on marketing in public transportation and gives lectures in this field. He's an extremely accomplished member within UITP and very active in the committees of Transport Economics, Combined Mobility, IT and Innovation, and Marketing Committee. Till, can you provide us some information on what is happening in Germany and what has been the impact of the COVID-19?
Yes, thank you, Hilja. Thanks for having me. And I'm happy to share the German view on that. So what I brought you in, for the start is the funding in public transport in Germany. And you can see here 3 columns because it's differentiated between the owners of the companies. On the left-hand side, you can see what is the normal public transport in the cities, which is done by municipality-owned PT companies. And there you see a fine share of deficit coverage from about 20%. And half of the yield is coming from the fare box. On the privately owned rural area bus companies, you see there is no deficit coverage in total. And on the right-hand side, you see the rail sector, where there's also no deficit coverage because the rail companies get contracts in advance, so they're funded by contracts. This is the money for the operation, and additional to that, there is a fund of 3.5 billion per year in investment funding in Germany for public transport. So this is the overall picture of public transport funding. And what you can see here in the green column by from the railways is that the money that the Länder, the German regions, spend for the rails is coming from the federal government via the Regionalisierungsgesetz, which is important for the coverage of the COVID loss of money in the next slides, please. So I just want to show you the decrease of ridership in Germany. Like in France, we lost a lot of our ridership, and now the reconfinement in November is down to 50%, as we saw it in the French line. So these are the figures. We were doing well in September and October. The recovery in the rural areas was quite high because in Germany the schools reopened after the holidays all over. So we got all the pupils back in the buses, and but now schools are open, but we have quite a loss of passengers right now. Next, please. Loss of passengers means loss of revenues. Here you can see the curve on how we did estimate the loss of revenues. For 2020, it is a total of 3.1 billion euros estimated. And for the next year, it's a little bit higher altogether because we think that we won't come back to the full fare box revenues until the end of next year. You see a little bit that we also calculated in cost savings in the first lockdown, the first confinement, because we had, when the schools were closed, some extra buses for the school pupils did not run, so we had some cost savings in the first confinement. Now we do the full service, and that's why there is no cost savings anymore. Next, please. So the question is, how did we manage to get some money back? In the very beginning, in the first confinement, we established a nationwide working group on financial impacts and scenarios. And from the viewpoint of May 2020, there were two scenarios with a loss of revenue from 5 up to 7 billion euro, because we thought that we will lose more of our subscription customers, which turned out not as bad as we estimated in the end. We were lucky about that. So our customers stick to public transport and stick to their subscription. The biggest success was that we managed that the 5 billion scenario was the basis of the discussions between the lender and the federal government. So our figures were taken for the political discussion on what shall the federal government give to the lender, and this was very good. So our job was providing the actual data, and this was taken by the politicians. In June, Germany already started its rescue and economic stimulus package. That includes the help for public transport. You can see it here. The package in Germany is 130 billion euros, and that includes 2.5 billion euros from the federal government, and these are paid to the lender via that mentioned Regionalisierungsgesetz, which is usually taken for buying rail traffic. So the lender took the decision to give another 2.5 billion, but they have to bring that in their own parliaments and had to act individually. For sure, the process of funding was notified with the EU. Since we did not have to get 5 billions in this year, the lender did not pay as much as they said they would do, but in the end, we think that they will have those 3.1 to 3.2 billions in altogether for this year, and that some of the funds which the lender already would be willing to pay would be paid next year, because as we have shown, next year the sum of loss will actually be higher. Next, please. So what did we, as I told you, the lender helped with their own money, but less than originally estimated. We think that next year there will be a much higher loss altogether. And what we achieved right now for the next year is that the lender already accepted this figure, the 3.5 billion euro, for their talks with the federal level again. So we hope that we will prolong that funding, that rescue funding for the next year as well. What did we do as VDV, as the association? We started with our members, so with the PT companies, but also paid by the federal government and the lender a joint marketing campaign to get the riders back in public transport. And we jointly work on tickets for home office subscriptions, so teleworking, when people do not ride to work as often as they did. Maybe we introduce some new kinds of tickets, flexible subscription, things like that. And we work on a new digital interoperable ticket solution, not only to increase digitalization, but also to show the politicians and say something like, thank you, we understand, and thanks for the money, and we do things jointly together for our customers. That's my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Till. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I'm not able to ask you a question as a follow-up on what is happening in Germany. But I do encourage everybody listening to this webinar to contact the VDV directly if they want to have any follow-up on the German case.
Sure.
Sorry very much. And now I'm going to go to Emanuele Proia, who is the general manager of ASSTRA. Emanuele had to leave for a bit. I don't know if he is on the webinar. Emanuele, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Hi, Emanuele. So just to introduce you quickly to those who don't know you, you are the General Manager of ASSTRA and Head of Economic, Financial and Statistical Department, as well as responsible for dissemination and communication. You have a degree in economics from the Rome University La Sapienza and a master in business administration with a specialization in management of public transport companies. You've been in ASSTRA since 2003, but have also worked for APTA, the American Public Transport Association. You are in charge of the Economic and Financial Department, as we said, as well as an active member of the Economic Transport Economics Committee within UITP, where you have worked with me very closely, leading various working groups on fares, fraud, cost structures, and financing. Emanuele, could you please provide us an overview of what is happening in Italy? I'm going to stop sharing the screen and let you share yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this interesting moment of discussion and European comparison on the impact of COVID on our sector. I will begin by presenting the salient numbers in terms of demand trends, tariff revenues, and the main measures that Italian institutions have adopted during these difficult months for the entire Italian economy and of public finance, which, as you know, the fundamentals in terms of public debt, deficit spread, are not characterized by excellent health. This slide summarizes the financing model of operating cost, which shows that over 50% comes from state public intervention through a national transportation fund. And this fund is fed by general taxation and divided among the regions. The remaining 30% is from fare revenues, and the other 17% includes additional contribution to operating account, for example, other public subsidies from municipality regions, revenues for advertising, rent, and so on. So in this slide, you can easily see also the main data. So our turnover is 12 billion euro. The national fund is around 5 billion and 4 billion from fare revenues. I'm not telling you anything new in showing the trend of passengers in 2020, in the period of lockdown and semi-lockdown, with enormous problems deriving from the capacity limits on vehicles imposed by government. For example, from September, the capacity limit in our means of transport is 80%. But now, just after this second wave of COVID, is just 50%. No, so we are living a lot of problems in terms of operating the service. In aggregate terms, these are the numbers. I will briefly read them to you. So from March to December, the average percentage of passenger reduction was 68%. Every day we are losing 10 million of passengers. The loss of fare revenues is estimated in 2 billion, more than 2 billion of euro, respect the 4 billion before COVID-19. the government has intervened with important measures, but unfortunately, these measures are not enough to guarantee the economic balance of our service contract. The first is that of having guaranteed the invariance of public grants, even in the event of reduction in millage. No, so there is a law with Article 92 of Decree 18, where it was established that we received the same public contribution of 2019. So without any shortcut, even if we don't, even if we didn't guarantee the same level of kilometers. And with Article 200 of another decree, so 34 2020, we obtain the compensation of reduction in fair revenues, approximately 800 millions of euros. But as you can see in this slide, the gap to assure the economic balance, the economic equilibrium of the sector is still more than 1 billion of euros. So we are working hard to integrate some resources into the state budget law, and our position, of course, that we are so public transport is an essential service of general economic interest, and we have been obliged to perform the service even against our commercial interest. So during the lockdown, our service was in average 80%, 70% compared with the previous, with 2019. So there is not any doubt that we have to be compensated by public resources, and this concept, it is clear, no? It's an European principle, first from Altmark judgment and then from UE Regulation 1370. A unique opportunity, it comes from the Great European Investment Plan, and fortunately, Italy is among the first beneficiaries. For our sector, it is an irrepeatable opportunity to be able to set up a new expansive season investments, and among the green ones that they will have a preference channel, not the green investment in public transport, so increasing, renewing the bus and train fleet, accelerating infrastructural and instrumental investment, increasing the safety and security of regional rail transport public, and very important is to accelerate also the process towards digital innovation, because the digital innovation, in particular in this moment, as the priority in our investment policy. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. This was a really enlightening presentation on what's happening in Italy. Unfortunately, again, as we don't have much time, I won't be able to ask you a question. But I think what we can say is that across all these examples that we've seen is that similar scenarios are happening, but the level and extent of responses are quite different, maybe because of the tools available, the framework. However, one threat that I'm seeing is that while the outlook for 2021 seems to be dire, we're also seeing much space for opportunity. We're seeing for opportunity to change ourselves and to reinvent the sector. So we hope that with these presentations, we have been able to provide some input for Spain's discussion on their on what's happening, as well as their ongoing debate for their new financing law. However, please know that we will also be looking at Spain to see if any interesting ideas may also be applicable somewhere else within UITP members.